Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Ballet. I'm the creator of Guardians of Magic. So, I want to create this video. I want to talk about more detailed video of why I created Guardians of Magic and how did it all come about, and just start talking about it and more detail and more explanations of why I created it and my little journey into the process and so on. So, like all good stories, it all starts off when you're a little boy, a little kid, and things catch your interest. And for me, anything about Atlantis or Egypt caught my attention. And if it was on the History Channel or the Discovery Channel, I was glued to the TV. I wanted to know what they're talking about, what they knew about Atlantis, and so on. But it always felt like it was always so basic, that so much of the story was missing and that the full story wasn't being told. And so, so be it. But it is what it is. And I just said, well, Atlantis was just a myth, a legend, something that people made up. That was kind of like me in the beginning, but always still had that interest, that need to know more, that something else was missing. So, and one day I was sitting on the couch, or I was in the bedroom, one of the two, and my girlfriend at the time said, "Hey, you might like this book." So I have this book here, and it's about the mysteries of the crystal skulls. So, and also around this time, Ancient Aliens was coming out, and I was into the whole series and was watching every episode. So, and when she had this book, she's like, "I bought this book a few years ago, so you might like this." And it talks about the crystal skulls. So I was like, okay, I gave it a try. About a month or two later, I started reading the book. And I get to chapter 7. It talks about crystal skull and so on with Atlantis. And what chapter was it? Here we go. So chapter 7, it starts talking about the talking skull and the messages from the skull. So, and the name of the book is, I can't believe I forgot this, The Mystery of the Crystal Skulls by Chris Martin and Sherry Lewis Thomas. Unlocking the secrets of the past and the present and the future. So I started reading the book, get to chapter 7, it starts talking about messages from the talking skull. So the person that is doing the messages from the talking skull, she's a channeler. So she puts her hands on the skull, and she's able to channel messages from the skull. And it starts talking about Atlantis, and me being very interested in Atlantis and Egypt and ancient mysteries caught my attention even more. So once when they started talking about Atlantis, I was like, okay, interesting. So they're talking about how Atlantis, the destruction of Atlantis, and how Atlantis was very advanced with crystalline technology, and they created the crystal skull, and they abused knowledge and their power later on, and that it was created around 17,000 BC or 15,000 BC. So that also puts into a lot of theories that, well, a lot of people think Atlantis was 2,000 years ago, if that, or 1,000 years ago. This is saying that Atlantis was 17,000 years ago, and so on, or when this was created. So if this was created around the time of Atlantis, then this also goes to show that Atlantis is a lot older than what a lot of people think about. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was pretty good. And then I realized that Carol Davis wrote another book with more details, more messages of the crystal skull, because in this chapter it's pretty short. It's only a few pages long. So I did some research and I found a copy of her other book from Carol Davis, and there's not many that was printed. So now she did a lot of channeling with the crystal skull, the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull to be exact. So she gets a hold of the skull, does some sessions with it, and she prints out a book, and she relays all the messages that she finds. And so now things are getting a little bit more interesting, more detailed. It starts talking about more technology that Atlantis has had, that Atlantis wasn't just a place where people were just throwing spears and they were rowing in boats and not doing anything and so on. They were very, very advanced. They had advanced temples, they had advanced houses and culture and energy and power and electrical, but not like our electricity. It was different. It was more crystalline based electricity. So more information about how Atlantis destroyed itself and so on. So and it goes on to different things. It even gives messages to mankind, how mankind is playing with things that we shouldn't be playing with. We're playing with technologies we shouldn't be playing with, and our government is dealing with technologies that are harming us now, but there's no immediate side effect. So we wouldn't know about this until down the road, years later, and that we need to stop this and so on. So another interesting statement from the crystal skull that I find pretty interesting was that in the book by Carol Davis was that there was an argument saying, how can you create matter out of sound and thought and energy? How can you create matter out of this? And the skull responded, well, same way you created cancer. And that was interesting that it said that. So that we can create cancer like that and so on. But that's a whole nother story, whole nother avenue to talk about on that one. So finished this book. How many pages is it? 116, about 116 pages. So you can go through it. There's not many in production and so on. So, but it's by Carol Davis, and it's called The Skull Speaks. So I think I had to pay $50 for this book, so the most expensive book I ever bought, but worth it. I've read this book 2 or 3 times already, and the more I read it, the more things make sense as I'm reading these other books that I'm going to tell you about, that these books become more clear, because these Crystal Skull books are more detailed and basic. So whereas the other books kind of give you more general information, more description, and more explanations about what they're talking about. So after that, I was like, well, let me see if there's another book out there and see if there's something else that catches my attention that talks about the Crystal Skulls, with messages from the Crystal Skull. Came across another book, gave it a try, and this one's called The Message of the Crystal Skull, From Atlantis to the New Age. So caught my attention, and this is by Alice Bryant and Phyllis Glad. So, and all these books are on my website. So if you go to guardiansofmagic.com and you go to collection, you're going to see the books that I'm talking about. And there's more information. There's even pictures and links and so on. And you can, and I'm going to put the links in the description as well. But this book, the one that talks about the message of the Crystal Skull, From Atlantis to the New Age. Now this one talked about how Atlantis was destroyed a few times, and that Atlantis people scattered. Some people went to the Yucatan and some people went to Egypt and so on. So I was like, okay, so now there's a connection. The original stories, or the stories that everybody knows, is that Atlantis fell and it went into the sea, and everybody was gone. Everybody died. But in these messages, it's not like that. The survivors had opportunity. Matter of fact, certain survivors left Atlantis at different times, and they had opportunity to leave. Now, when the final destruction of Atlantis came, that's when everybody evacuated as much as they could, and left the island and went to other continents, other countries, and so on. But so now I'm reading the third book, and I'm like, all this great information, all this technology, all this power, the crystals and so on. I'm like, what else is out there? So then I come across Edgar Casey's book. Now he gets a little bit more details as well. He starts talking in one of his books. He talks about the fire crystal. So that caught my interest, and the fire crystal was one of the crystals that had this power, this energy that was being abused, and that the Atlanteans were using the power of this crystal to get to the Earth's core, to get more energy, more power, so they can be in more control and be stronger and had this unlimited power. So, because they were doing things earlier, they were using their power to control people. They were using their power to put fear into people, so it was a big no-no. And they were using their wisdom and energy into creating half an animal and half human, and that was a big no-no. Mixing of DNA. So the aliens, or the guardians, did not want them to do this, so they were warned, and they refused to do it because they felt like they were in control. It's what they wanted to do. They already had all this knowledge and all this power, so they wanted more energy and control their own fate. But there was some drawbacks. They kind of hurt themselves and destroyed the first destruction as well. So Edgar Casey talks about the fire crystal, and now we're start talking about more and more in details about the technology and so on. And after Edgar Casey's book, and there's a link on my website about it. After this book, I'm like, how come no one is talking about this? I was like, this stuff is exciting and mind-blowing. I said, there's so much great information in here. There's so much stuff in here. How come no one's even bringing it up or talking about it? I'm like, just, anything. Anything mainstream-wise. Even if it was a story and we don't even know if it's true or not, but yet we have all these channelers and psychics and mediums and so on talking about it. So I wanted to start bringing this knowledge, this information to light. I wanted this to, for this to go more mainstream and to bring a lot of this exciting topics and stories to light. And I knew the only way to do it was to do it in some kind of story, like a sci-fi action story, and try to make it as real as possible, but with a Hollywood twist and with action and so on. So, but reading these books and so on, it was not too much action going on unless it was something wrong, but it was pretty much plain old life, simple life. It was their religion, their temples, and you did what you had to do with the family, and your day kind of repeated. So you have to throw in some Hollywood twist, some action to keep the motion going, the excitement going. So I decided to create my own story to bring a lot of this information to light, try to get this information more mainstream. Maybe one day, hopefully one day, it will go to the cinema, Hollywood, the movies, anything like that. Even a cartoon or animation would be great as well. But something to bring a lot of this information to light and to mainstream. Because right now it's all in books, and a lot of people, when they hear, Edgar Casey's, the sleeping prophet. A lot of people are like, oh, that's fake. That's not real. But when you look at all these other people in these books, it's kind of similar. A lot of similarities, and a lot of stuff gets repeated and so on. So after that, I decided to come up with Guardians of Magic, and just one night, just all the pieces start falling into place, like the characters and the action and the story, where it's going to begin. It was going to start off out in space and in the galaxy and so on. And the name, Guardians, I knew it had to be something with Guardians. And then the other word that always came up the most was magic, and how they were the protectors of magic. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to call it Guardians of Magic, because this is kind of like what they're doing. They're the protectors of this information and this knowledge and technology. But I needed more information. So with the Crystal Skull books and the Atlantis books from Edgar Casey, just wasn't enough. So I did some more research, and I was going through some YouTube videos, and I came across a video by Dolores Cannon. So she is a hypnotherapist, and she does past life regressions, and in her books she talks about how people had lives in Atlantis. So I'm like, okay, got my attention, interested in the subject. I heard about past life regressions and didn't know much about it, but I give it a try. Did some research. Her book, Convoluted Universe Part 1, she has 5 books, and each book is like 500, 600 pages. So they're very, very thick books. But she has a few chapters where she talks about Atlantis and Convoluted Universe, the first one and the second one. So I buy both books, and that's when I was amazed. I was amazed by how advanced Atlantis was, and how much the culture was, and how advanced they were. They were more advanced than us. And in the other books, like with the Crystal Skulls and Edgar Casey, I was like, if they were so advanced, how come we don't see their technology? And how come there's no records? So I was, a lot of questions were unanswered. But reading Dolores Cannon's book opened up and answered a lot of my questions. So as I'm doing research for Guardians of the Magic to come up with this sci-fi action story, I realized, a lot of the records are the Akashic records. They found a similar system, and they used those records as Akashic records, and they have their own version of it. So you have that going on. Their technology was more plain and simple, as in only manufactured dealt with once. For example, it's either going to be a tree, a stone, a rock, or crystal, something that's just one process, not like plastics and so on, where something has to be manufactured in chemicals and stuff. At least not in the beginning that I know of. I think later on they get into some other type of materials, but they knew how to transform crystals. They knew how to transform stone, wood. They didn't manufacture like we do. They communicated mind to mind. They can control things with their mind. They could shape things with their mind. They could transform the crystals, and that's how their advance on crystal technology was so advanced, because they could take a crystal, change the structure, the molecular level of that, and shape it and mold it to where it had a certain function. But everything was more one process. If you needed to build something out of stone, that stone was molded and shaped into whatever you needed it to be, and to serve that purpose. But since crystals had more unique property, more diverse, they used a lot of crystals and so on. even certain screens and certain windows, they would take a crystal and shape it and form it into a flat crystal. And so they were more grounded with the earth, and they try to balance everything. They try to balance things with nature and their living and their culture. Everything was more balanced, male and female and so on. And so that was like unbelievable, and I was like, this is great, this is awesome. The power pyramid, the amount of energy that came from this pyramid with the fire crystal was more detailed, and like they couldn't have other human beings at a lower dimension go too close to these certain power pyramids, because it will mess up their vibration and so on. And I was like, what is this all about? So caught my attention on that one. I needed to know more, and I found out what they meant by the vibration, what they meant by the frequency, and so on. And they talk about that in the Crystal Skull books as well. Frequency, vibration, and so on. Now that stuff, when I was reading it, I was just reading it just to go through it, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But these books from Dolores Cannon caught my attention. So that was the Dolores Cannon, the first book, and then it talks about more about the fall of Atlantis in the second book, and how they were creating these animals that were half human and half animal, and they were using them for sport and war and controlling other groups with fear and so on. So, and they will create them and transform them, and they even gave one girl legs from a horse, and so now she has these horse legs, and she's half human, and she has these horse legs. And not saying that they couldn't heal it, but in their mind they were like, well, let's just see if we can do it, and if it'll work, just to see if we can do it. And they did it, and she was in pain ever since, but it worked. She was able to walk with these horse legs. So in their mind, they're like, well, we can do it. We can get away with it. So that was brought up. And another thing is anti-gravity and matter and so on. So they had this technology and know-how, and of course levitation is another thing. They could levitate blocks, and that would be talked about later on about the pyramids and so on. But for right now, Atlantis-wise, they could levitate, and they had this anti-gravity technology. So, and they wanted to get to the Earth core, and to get more energy from the Earth's core, so they can be more powerful, and nothing could stop them, and they can rule how they wanted to rule, and they could do what they wanted to do. So it gets kind of dark at the end. Of course, that's how they destroy themselves and so on. They were trying to be stopped. Other groups from Atlantis was telling them that this was wrong, they shouldn't be doing this, but they thought they could get away with it and do it. So of course it didn't work, and they destroyed themselves. So the land opened up, and it folded on them, and it sank into the ocean. And after that, it was a wrap. Now when they knew they couldn't be stopped, and they weren't going to stop, a lot of people fled the islands, and they knew destruction was coming. So a lot of people went to Egypt, the Yucatan, South America. I was thinking they would have went to North America, but in one of the books they talk about how North America, majority of it, was underwater. So, and they did talk about, I think it was either Arizona or the Grand Canyon, New Mexico, somewhere out there was not underwater. So they did venture out that way, but everybody kind of went to different places. Greek, the Mediterranean, everybody was scattered everywhere. But the two main locations was the Yucatan area and Egypt. And even when other people went to certain locations, they went back to Egypt because Atlantis, that culture started popping up and growing again in these certain areas. So some people, if they were in North America, they went down to be closer to these temples and so on that were being rebuilt. And same thing with Egypt. People that was in the Mediterranean area went over to Egypt as well because they were rebuilding and so on. And that's when we come to the pyramids, but that will be later. So all this was fascinating, and I just said, man, this is crazy. This is absolutely mind-blowing. And I was like, this has to come out. So I started getting to work right away, I already came out with the first book, the second book at this time, July 2018. So now I'm working on 2 more books, talk about the golden age of Atlantis and so on. But my goal is to have this mainstream in the movies. Hopefully, that's my ultimate goal. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? At least an animation, a cartoon, animations, something that will at least capture 200 million people, 2 million people, something around that lines. But also with Dolores Cannon, with the past life regression, one of the things that they were able to see all these different things was, they call it the elevator effect. So that I was interested in, because the elevator would take you to a certain location in your mind under hypnosis, and the elevator doors will open in your mind, and a being will be there to show you the records of Atlantis, to show you the records of Egypt, and you will see it clear as day in your mind. So made me interested in Dolores Cannon's past life regression courses. So I did take those, and I am a QHHT practitioner, and I do practice past life regression as well. And I already been hearing fascinating stories of other worlds and other galaxies and so on. And people living on other planets, people living hundreds of thousands of years ago, people that has lived in the medieval ages and so on. So the amount of information that's out there in these past life regressions is amazing. So, and these people have that sense of that they're there and they're feeling it and they can smell it and so on. So I know some people are going to say, oh, that's fake, past life regression, that's all in your mind, it's fake. But when you're doing it and you trying it and you're under hypnosis, it's very, very real. So you had the feelings of it, how this felt and how you felt when this was going on. It is very real. So, but if you don't believe in the past life regressions, then so be it. But so this is how I came out to be coming around to make Guardians of Magic. So I came up with some characters, trying to keep it original, like King Atlas. I'm gonna start creating King Atlas and Poseidon, and letting people know that, hey, all this stuff is not like a city that's underwater. There's more to it that's with Atlantis. And I'm just very, very excited about this subject and creating this, and it's all hands-on and so on. Hiring artists and writers and so on, and tell them what to do, what to look for, and what I want into all this stuff. And then and it's growing, so I'm trying to get some movement going, some popularity going. So please hit that subscribe button as well. So there's going to be more information coming out, more videos as well. I know I probably messed up on this video, this recording a few times, but this is not scripted. This is coming just from what I think. I probably forgot a few things as well. So, but hit that subscribe button. This will get better as it flows and gets, more in tune and so on. So, but I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. There's going to be stuff on Kickstarter, so I'm going to be looking for support. My book's on Amazon as well. Create some excitement, get things going, and hopefully in the future I will be on some of these YouTube videos with other people getting interviewed, and I'm interviewing them for their information on Atlantis and so on. So, and like I said, check out the website Guardians of Magic. For the section with the books, click on collection, and I'll do another video that talks about more about my story with Guardians of Magic and the enlightenment process and the characters and so on. So, but I just wanted to get this one out the way. Let's see, I'm at 31 minutes, so that's not too bad. So I want to thank you. Have a good night.